There are many reasons for our divorce. One of them is our desire to be perfect. Perfect spouses, perfect parents. And maybe my story will help someone to hear the alarm bells and find the strength to begin to change something before it is too late. When I finally decided to divorce, my oldest son was 4.5 years old, my middle son was 2.5, and my daughter was getting ready to be born. She was born at the height of the conflict. When I say that with 3 small children left her husband, women are usually shocked, and men delicately try to hide their attitude to this. And for myself, a phrase from the mother of 2 children. I would have long divorced, but where am I alone with them? Until recently sounded normal. When a woman depends on the man financially, she put up with what she was not satisfied with in a marriage and in the partner for the security of offspring. Although it is not only the material dependence on her spouse that keeps her going, but also the unwillingness to hurt her children, the fear of condemnation. An unwillingness to admit the failure of the project called family. I left, burning all my bridges. I could have stayed in the family only by becoming indifferent to everything. A person of indeterminate gender with a permanently extinguished gaze. Oddly enough, it all started with a desire to be happy, and the desire to start my own business. When my future husband wanted me to go with him to another city, I was dissuaded by my parents. I had known him for 1 week. My mom was afraid I wouldn't make it, that our relationship would end in 3 years. Then I told myself, apparently out of a desire to prove my mom wrong, that I would be happy. Mom was wrong. We didn't live together for 3 years, but 11 years. Even more wrong than my mother was myself. Caught in the trap of positive thinking, I tried to see the pluses in both my husband and my situation. I tried not to notice that all of his stories about conniving wives and bad mothers on the background of good men. My ego was warmed by the thought, if he is so disappointed in women and chose me, then I am special. I accepted him for who he was. I followed his principles and views, giving up my own. My husband used to say that if a woman does not earn money, she is a parasite sitting on her husband's neck. So I learned how to earn money. The goal was to build my business from scratch, then create a remote income to move out of town. Cool goals that elicited exclamations of amazement from those around me. And so it was. Life goes on. When the situation calls for it, I learned to live in Spartan conditions. Sometimes there is nothing to eat, but we don't get discouraged, or we pretend not to. We practice wellness fasting, and we live by the principle, no debts and loans. We do not ask for help, even from parents. We have no friends. We don't have time to be friends. We are on the way to our goals. We don't get a job to achieve it. Even when I was 8 months pregnant and went to cold sales, my husband was not looking for an opportunity to earn extra money. It would distract me from my goal, set me back, eat up my time. And I couldn't tell him how hard it was for me, mentally and physically. I just did what I had to do. My husband's persistence was admirable, and I admired him. He was my companion and support. Only 10 years later, I realized that at that time I was struggling, not living. At negotiations for the right to have other people's money. At home, I fought for the right not to go to work. The second struggle I invariably lost. In parallel with business, we were building a family. It seems to be working. He is like a head. He makes decisions, takes official responsibility. The business was started by him. It's in his name. The mortgage is on him too. So why do I get scared? It makes sense. Because at a time when I have a newborn baby in my arms, it depends on my sales tax, how soon we can pay the mortgage, and whether we can at all. Out of fear for the kids, I'm getting more and more caught up in the wagon, work, kids, and the vegetable garden. I look more and more like a workhorse than a woman. There's no time to ask myself, why? Even when the mortgage is paid off, I couldn't stop. Probably so I wouldn't have to look for answers to the questions. Why is there so little together in our life together? Where's the joy? Yes, there is business, betting, talking about his favorite topics, children. And that's it. Is that enough? Why does the payback for many of the decisions we made together fall only on my shoulders? For example, we decided that kids shouldn't wear disposable diapers. Who wakes up 5 times a night to change diapers? We had a business together, registered in his name. By law, it takes 6 months to come into my inheritance. How will I and my children survive those 6 months if he dies and the whole system comes to a halt? I blamed myself for such thoughts and therefore did not discuss with him the question of his safety. We are not customary to talk to a person that, thinking about his death, you worry about yourself. And I didn't even allow myself to think about it. But apparently in the subconscious, the process began. I began to give myself back my power, to look for opportunities to be aware of my desires. I went to training sessions, looking for something that would make me feel alive. I began to turn from a life-tortured workhorse into a living person. I began, for the first time in 10 years of life together, to read books not only on copywriting, sales, and children, but the ones that I like. I bought a laptop and was glad about the spring because I could sit not in the house, but under the blossoming apple trees in our garden. I felt my true self coming back to me. I also fell in love and wanted to leave my family. Those around me, of course, judged me, and my parents refused to support me, saying, "Try to keep the family together. You have children." It hurt that it was my parents who weren't on my side. Who was on my side then anyway? Was the whole world against me? I listened to my parents' reasoning. For 6 months, while we were trying to save the family, my husband gave me flowers and even once took me to a restaurant 170 kilometers away from home. He surprised me with breakfast, gave me massages, let me read books on how to be a proper Vedic wife. But I could not forgive myself or him for the effort I had made on myself when we were on our way to our goals together. Yes, I had become strong, and I was grateful to him for that. But it was too painful to die a woman in me who had to learn to deny her desires. If we lived in the city, I would have just left with the kids in English without saying goodbye while he was at work. But my husband didn't go to the office, and we lived 320 kilometers from the nearest major city. It seemed like there was just nowhere for me to go. So we still lived together, and I couldn't take it anymore. I refused to write sales texts on a topic that had long ceased to be of interest to me. Yes, it fed us. But the process itself took from me so exorbitant that the money is not measured. It was as if a huge black hole was forming in me, through which a powerful vacuum cleaner was pumping out my joy of life and moral strength. I was 7 months pregnant and decided that I had the right to be on maternity leave, at least once. My husband, and business partner in one, talked me into getting back into business. For the first time, he couldn't convince me. I was expecting my daughter. It was increasing responsibility. What I could give her now, while she was inside, was energy and health. I didn't want the black hole to take away what was meant for the baby girl. I tried to explain this to my husband. But in 10 years, I have not learned to speak in a language he can understand about what is critically important to me. So I just stopped doing what my husband wanted and did not talk about it. I stayed as firm as a rock for 2 months in my decision to give him the right to be a breadwinner. I had to beat myself on the hand because the work is also an addiction. But I said, learn to write yourself. My husband didn't take it seriously, didn't want to develop in that direction. After all, I always let him talk me into it. The new year was approaching. It is a time of joy and anxiety for entrepreneurs, because on New Year's Eve you can make a good profit. When I saw that instead of the potential 200,000 rubles, he earned less than 5, I had to make a difficult decision. To be patient and let him learn from his mistakes, starving himself and depriving the children, or to take sales into my own hands again. I realized that in 2 or 3 weeks, when there is nothing to eat, I will give in to his pressure and once again become a workhorse, sadly pacing in a circle. I decided to take a proactive stance. I thought about the letter and sent it to my subscribers. I felt as if I was jumping into the last car of a departing train. Within an hour, the payment system was exploding with requests. Money appeared for a month and a half of quiet life. That's when I realized I wouldn't be alone. I insisted that he give me 1/3 of the profits. I went to my parents. I needed the strength to make a final decision. After all, the question of divorce, I thought about 1.5 years. In the last month, offered to find options when he will take more responsibility for the children and earnings, and I can breathe. When I told him I was getting a divorce, instead of throwing tantrums, manipulating my children, and tightening the screws, he would have tried to hear my needs, I would have stayed. Family was something sacred to me back then. Divorce was seen as a failure and a shame. The collapse of life values. I certainly didn't want to be the initiator. But living with a man who denies you is not an option. So I saved myself. After getting help from my psychologist, my acquaintance, and my parents, I began to fight for the right to be me. When we divorced, I learned that the environment considered our family as a role model. Men used to cite me as an example to their wives. That's how you should support your husband and his authority. I tried to be perfect for 10 years. I honestly thought I was happy. But it turned out that my admiration, support, and selfless work for the good of the family only inflated my male ego to unbelievable proportions. My responsibility is that I did not know how to recognize and communicate to him his needs and did not understand that without it, nothing. And you have to do that from the beginning of the relationship. It's unlikely you can quickly retrain when you've allowed 10 years to do otherwise. We are the ones who teach other people how we can and cannot be treated. From the first meeting and throughout our lives, the attempt to cheat nature failed. When I stopped appearing and began to just be, it turned out that my husband cannot accept me. He tried to shove me back into the bed of his ideal wife, by hook or by crook, but it was no longer my size. Postscriptum. I'm still pro-family, not a proponent of divorce. Indeed, it's scary to look into the soul and sort out what's going on with children whose parents have divorced. But it's hardly better for those children whose parents, though together, have both, or one of them, turned into mental dummies. Be sensitive to your loved ones and to yourself. The family is not just a unit of society. Make it a place where everyone is happy.